I'm Mark McCandlish. And for the better part of 30 years, I worked in the aerospace and defense industry. I had a secret clearance twice during my career. Some of the technology that I saw or participated in the creation of tends to play a role in some of the things that are used to control the weather. The very distribution process is being employed in the aerosol campaign, manipulating the weather, crops, taking over the food production or controlling the food production, the military applications. The process evolved when they realized in the 1800s that you can put things into the environment that will influence the uptake of moisture and where it drops out of the atmosphere again. If you can control where moisture is collected and where it's dropped, so to speak, in the form of rain or any other kind of precipitation, then you can really, you can do everything. You can steer the weather system. If you want to be able to manipulate the weather, one of the things we know about the materials that are being used in the aerosols, we've seen everything from aluminum oxide, barium salts, strontium, copper sulfate, potassium iodide, a number of different kinds of things, each of which have different levels of reactivity with the moisture in the air. Some like aluminum oxide tends to sequester the moisture. The aluminum oxide nanoparticles, which are microscopically fine and uniform in size, attract the humidity, the moisture in the air, and it basically forms like a nucleation process where the moisture condenses on these particles. Now then, if you hit that area of the sky with a beam of a particular kind of radiation, and you can heat those particles up, just like heating up, your cup of coffee in the microwave, these particles begin to vibrate and resonate if you use the right frequency of RF energy, that they then heat the surrounding air, and they will take all of that air and the moisture that's in it to a higher altitude where it's much colder, and it'll condense and then become a low pressure system. But you can also influence what happens locally with the atmosphere by painting the materials that these aerosols are made of with different kinds of radio frequency or RF energy, radar, microwave, the HAARP system. Owning the weather by 2025, using the weather as a force multiplier. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about if you can control where a weather system goes and how much or how severe the weather system is, then you can do other things, like you may have heard more recently that many of the aircraft that we've been developing are what they call all-weather capable, which means that they can fly in any kind of weather. They can shoot and target the enemy under really nasty weather circumstances. And these are all things that you can use to your advantage if you happen to be controlling the weather also, because you can have a terrible storm front come in and make it difficult, if not impossible, for the enemy to operate on the ground or to fly their aircraft if they don't have aircraft that are as sophisticated as the ones that you have. And so by creating or using the weather as a force multiplier, as the title implies, that you can achieve an advantage over an enemy force that gives you the upper hand. You can create weather systems that are so severe they culminate in battlefield denial, where the enemy is not able to use the roads or the bridges or get through the environment because the weather is so severe. And you can use the weather to destroy his crops, deny him a food source, destabilize his population, because people get hungry. When they're hungry, they get angry and nasty, and they don't like what's happening. So there are lots of different things that you can do with the materials. It's all how you use them in the environment, how you apply it. If you can control the weather, then you can control where the rain falls or where it doesn't fall. And if you can do that, then you can control whose crops survive and whose crops thrive. And if you happen to be favoring a corporation or a group of corporations that are flooding the market with genetically modified crops, you can see how manipulating the weather can actually change the market share that one or more corporations have. And there's there's lots of different ways that you can do it. You can do it by denying precipitation or by giving too much. You can cause unusually large hailstones to come out of the sky and completely obliterate a crop of corn. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. Tornadoes rip up an entire town, like Joplin, Missouri, I think it was. If you look back at the tapes of those weather systems and you look 5 days prior to that, you'll see that in those days preceding those events, there was all kinds of aerosols being sprayed all along the California coastline, where the moisture for those storms came from, where those storm systems originated. It's insidious. One of the most basic things about human society is that we need food and water. And these are two of the things that are most severely dependent upon good weather. Rain at the right time of the year, sunshine so crops can grow, not enough sunshine and they don't grow, too much water, the plants die, not enough water, the plants die. All of this goes back to the amount of food that's available. So if you starve people, they will be vulnerable. They will be much easier to manipulate and forced to do whatever a government wants them to do. So if you control how much food there is or its availability through things like the weather or using the weather as a strategic tool militarily, you can, dramatically influence what's going on in a country. And by doing that over and over again, sequentially through a region, it's possible that you can change the political spectrum over an entire region by doing this over and over again. Maybe even, do it over a much wider region, create so much instability that you're able to, come in and say, oh, we have these wonderful fast-growing crops, genetically modified, and this you'll have something to eat in less than 3 weeks, and I imagine that if you can control the food supply, that you can then consolidate the financial and the political interests of a country.